This story was shared with me by a fellow YouTuber and friend who goes by the name Mrs. AX. She told me it happened years ago in her quiet English village home. What follows is her account, a gentle, haunting memory she's never forgotten. This happened years ago in a small village in the southeast of England called Pluckley. It's a quiet place surrounded by fields and narrow lanes, the kind of village where the mist hangs low in the mornings and the air always carries the scent of rain. When I was little, I could never sit still for long. If I wasn't outside exploring, I was inside creating, turning scraps of paper into creatures, boxes into castles, and bits of string into toys. I loved making things out of nothing, just to see what they could become. On rainy days, when the fields turned to puddles and the world smelled of wet grass, I'd sit by the window, surrounded by color and glue, happy to let my imagination take over. We lived at the edge of the village, in a cottage half hidden behind overgrown hedges. Mornings there felt soft and still, with quiet lanes, birds in the hedgerows, and evenings that came early. It was the kind of place where imagination belonged. Mom worked at a nursing home a few miles away, caring for elderly residents who had no one else. She was patient and gentle, the kind of person everyone trusted. Some days she came home smelling faintly of soap and antiseptic, her hands tired but still warm when she held mine. I didn't really understand her job back then, only that it made her both proud and sad at the same time. At first, my make-believe world felt full enough. I'd build toy houses and fill them with paper people. I'd talk to my creations, give them names and stories, and move them around like they were alive. It was just the usual kind of play every child goes through. Then, one afternoon, something changed. I was sitting by the living room window, drawing with crayons, when I felt as if someone was moving just behind me. Not close enough to touch, just near enough that the air shifted. When I turned around, there was an older woman sitting in my mom's armchair. Her hair was short and gray, curled softly at the ends, and she wore a pale blue dress with a cardigan buttoned all the way up. She had a warm, gentle face and eyes that looked kind. I wasn't frightened. I just asked, "Hello? Are you visiting?" She smiled a little and said softly, "You can call me lady." That was all. But from that day on, she started appearing more often. Sometimes she'd sit beside me while I colored or built things. She'd hum quietly while I worked or ask about what I was making. I remember her saying, "You have clever hands. You make something from nothing." Her voice was calm, almost like a lullaby. When it rained, she'd sit near the window with me and tell me little stories about flowers that grew even in winter, about ivy that never stopped climbing, and about kindness that never really fades. It didn't seem strange at the time. To me, Lady was just another friend, an older one maybe, but still someone who liked my company. Mom sometimes heard me talking and asked who I was speaking to. She knew I often made up stories when I played, so at first she didn't think much of it. I'd just say, "Lady." She'd smile and say, "That's nice," then go back to what she was doing. One evening, Lady watched as I threaded colored pasta onto a string, making a necklace. She said, "That's lovely. Who's it for?" I told her I wasn't sure yet. Maybe someone who needed a bit of color. She smiled and said, "That's a kind thought." A few days later, I saw Lady again. She was wearing the necklace, that same uneven string of red, blue, and yellow pasta. It looked silly but sweet around her neck. I told her it suited her, and she just nodded, smiling softly. was eating dinner, I mentioned it to Mom. Lady liked her necklace, I said. Mom paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. What necklace? The one I made, I said. She's wearing it. Mom smiled at first, the kind of polite smile adults give when they think you're pretending again. But then I added, she said it makes her feel brighter, just like she felt at the home. That made Mom stop completely. Her smile faded, and she asked quietly, "The home?" I nodded. "Yes," she said she misses her garden there. Mom asked, "What does Lady look like today?" I still remember every detail. I told her she was wearing a blue dress, a cardigan, and my pasta necklace. Mom's face went pale. That night, I heard her crying quietly in her room. I didn't understand why until the next morning, when she told me that one of her friends from the nursing home had passed away a few days earlier. Her name was Ivy, and she looked exactly like the way I'd described Lady. Mom said Ivy had always worn that same blue dress on Sundays and a small silver locket she never took off. They used to sit together by the window at the home, talking for hours. That's why, when I told her Lady was wearing a necklace, even one made of painted pasta, it struck her so deeply. It felt like Ivy's way of remembering, or saying goodbye in her own gentle way. Losing her had been hard enough, but hearing me describe her so vividly brought it all rushing back. After that, Lady didn't visit as much. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of her reflection in the window or see her standing by the garden fence while I worked on my little crafts. She never spoke again. She just smiled that same calm smile, as if to say she was all right. Eventually, she stopped coming altogether. Years later, when I was old enough to understand, I found the necklace in a small drawer. The paint had faded, but the string was still strong. I remember holding it and catching the faint scent of lavender, the same scent that always seemed to follow Lady, soft and comforting. The old nursing home still stands at the edge of Pluckley. Its windows are boarded now, and no one goes there anymore. But the air around it still carries that same trace of lavender. And sometimes, when the wind moves just right, I feel that same gentle presence again, quiet, patient, kind. She never really left. I like to think she still stays there. I like